regardless of what your goals are, be them. Hello? Excuse me? Very rude cat. You're very rude, you know that. Hello, love you. Today is the day, team. The TFNL growth guide has just gone live. This is something I've been working towards for a few months now, and something I'm really proud to be able to present to you. And if you are interested in acquiring it, it can be found by clicking the link at the top of the description box. It's targeted at anybody who has any remote interest in training and working out, because it is worded and explained in a manner that is, in my opinion, easily understood, and isn't simply trying to isolate and target those who are purely interested in science-based training, but is formulated in a manner that can appeal to anybody who has any remote interest in working out. Beginner, intermediate or advanced, I can promise you that anybody within any of those categories will get a lot of benefit from this guide. 80 pages covering a range of different topics. The basics of what you actually need to progress and see results, how certain muscles function and what movements actually target those muscles, myths and misconceptions, a bit of nutritional information in there as well, supplementation, gym equipment, over 30 weeks of programming written out for you, in addition to a template to help you formulate your own program, a full video exercise library covering all the bits and bobs I speak about throughout the program. Honestly, it's juicy. It's bloody juicy. I actually brought some people in to help me with the guide because I really wanted to ensure that I was providing you with the best quality product possible. And due to that, it is unfortunately not free, but I've listed it for as cheaply as I can justify listing it. It is significantly cheaper than, as far as I'm aware, pretty much any guide on the market, and in my opinion, it is significantly more comprehensive and also significantly easier to understand. And currently there's 20% off as an introductory offer, which actually lists the guide for less than £20, which is at this current stage less than $25. By no means am I bashing anybody else's guides or any other work that influencers and content creators have put out there, not at all. I'm simply stating that, in my opinion, after having read hundreds of them, to be honest, I simply believe that the TFNL growth guide is arguably one of the most comprehensive and easy to understand guides on the market for a fraction of the price of the majority of them. Because I'm not trying to milk you for money, that's never my intention with the channel, because at the end of the day, without you, I wouldn't be in this position and I wouldn't be given the opportunity to actually create this content and things I enjoy doing. Oh, hello my boy. You heard about the guide. You're going to get it. Do you get a shout out? Like I said, I'm not trying to milk anybody for money, and I'm never going to pressure you to purchase the guide if you don't want to. Honestly, the fact that you're even watching this video is more support than I could ever ask for, and for that I'm eternally grateful. I'm simply stating that if you do want to take your training to the next level, regardless of what your goals are, be them... Hello? Excuse me? Very rude cat. You're very rude, you know that. Hello, love you. I'm simply stating that if your goals are at all related to muscles to whatever extent, which realistically, if you're into working out and fitness, they are going to be related to muscles to an extent, then I do genuinely believe that this guide can really help you kind of sift away from a lot of the nonsense in the industry and better understand what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and why you should be doing it. So like I said, the link to acquire the guide is going to be the first line of the description, and also probably dropped in the comment section as well, in the pinned comment. But please never feel pressure to buy it or invest your money into me or anything like that. I'm never going to ask that of you. I'm simply stating that if you want to, I've created something, and if no one downloads it, that's absolutely fine as well. Thank you for putting me in a position where I'm able to create guides to distribute to you guys. Thank you for giving me a platform where I'm able to speak about the things I genuinely care about and hopefully help other people with their training and sometimes their mental health too. And thank you for tolerating just who I am and how much I waffle unnecessarily. But I've kept you for far too long. Let's crack straight on with the video. So today we have Pamela Reif. I'm sorry if I butchered the name. I try my best, but I'm actually notoriously bad at names. Also, the headpiece does say ho ho ho, so it is Christmas-ish, I just want to clarify. So we're looking at a 15-minute leg workout, floor only, level medium, slow Pilates style, low impact, knee friendly. So this caught my attention because Pamela is someone I have covered before, and Pamela is actually somebody who, in some cases, I've maybe questioned some of the bits she's done, but also in other cases, I've been actually quite impressed with what she's done. And we're looking at this because essentially it is a slow way to train your inner thighs, hamstrings, butt and quads. And that means no squats, nothing extreme for the knees, and nothing that will make you sweat. This workout has a touch of elegance while moving your legs in all kinds of directions to train our muscles in a very calm way. We start with a set of glute bridges, continue with a big variety of side lifts, inner thigh lifts, booty movements and small stretching. Calm down set in the very end. The rest of the description somewhat implying the importance of the mind-muscle connection. The mind-muscle connection is often kind of deemed to be or seen as how much you're feeling in movement. So let's say you're doing a glute bridge. When you think about mind-muscle connection, you would be really thinking about contracting the glutes, maybe sacrificing some load, maybe sacrificing some intensity just to make sure you're really squeezing the glutes really hard and thinking about how hard that muscle is working. That's how it's commonly perceived. When it comes to actually achieving muscular development and muscle growth through, let's say, hypertrophy, regardless of what your goals are, if you're training the muscles to some extent, you probably want to experience some results from that muscle being trained. The mind-muscle connection is far less important than you might think, and this is also actually very misunderstood. Sensation doesn't necessarily correlate to effectiveness, and you can essentially convince yourself or make ineffective movements feel very effective just by squeezing muscles that aren't necessarily working how they should be working. You can essentially make them feel like they're doing more than they are, therefore reducing how effective that movement actually is for the intended muscles you're looking to work. So we're starting off, obviously, bear in mind this is meant to be a leg workout. Movements like this are probably a lot less leg than you might think. So obviously we're maintaining a crunch position here, which is obviously going to bring them the abdominal region, not legs. And also we're doing these leg lifts, which is essentially going to be very hip flexor dominant. The hip flexors sit around the pelvis and are largely responsible for this kind of leg lift motion. So again, that's not necessarily the quads, the hamstrings and the glutes as previously promised. Now we go on to a glute bridge. We actually do quite a few glute bridge variations because I have actually seen this video a couple of times before. Maintaining that tiptoe position does not ultimately change how the glutes are working. The range of motion in which the glutes are going through is not altering based on the position of the foot. The only thing you might get from this is you might get some additional calf aches and pains because you're obviously maintaining that tension due to keeping that tiptoe position. From the glute bridge, we're also going into a pulse. The glute max, for example, which is the muscle of the glutes, seems to have its best leverage in the shortened position. So things like this, where you're holding the shortened position, so shortened position is referring to the point in which the muscle is most contracted, so this top portion, because obviously this is where they have the best leverage, it's not a bad idea to spend a bit more time in that position, which again is something I do cover in the growth guide. You get everything in this, it's madness. And then we go into essentially a wider bridge, but you're on heels. Again, the only thing that's really changes is the foot and the knee positioning. You're obviously separating the knees. Again, it's just glute after glute after glute. And the thing with that is essentially, because we are doing so many glute bridge dominant movements back to back to back, you're obviously going to experience a lot of burning in the glutes here, and maybe some in the lower back as well, depending on how you're doing it. But the reality is, this is kind of what I meant earlier, is sensation doesn't necessarily correlate to effectiveness. Although the glute bridge is a fantastic movement for the glutes, I'm a big fan of it. It's actually one of my favourite movements. I'm glad Pamela has included it. The inclusion of doing multiple glute bridge variations to me implies that she's trying to get her audience to feel a certain way to maybe make them think that the workout might be more effective than it actually is. I must also note that I'm fully acknowledging and aware that this workout is not created with the intended purpose of hypertrophy. Obviously, if you're working out your muscles to an extent, you want to achieve some result. That typically comes down to hypertrophy to an extent, because when someone says I want to tone my muscles, that usually results in bigger muscles and maybe lower body fat percentage. When someone says I want to get stronger muscles, again, that usually results in some kind of muscular development. So I'm not saying it always does, I'm simply stating that working the muscles typically results in some kind of development. I'm not saying you're trying to be a bodybuilder or trying to solely grow the muscle, you're simply doing something that may yield some type of development. With that in mind, you probably want to do movements that are still effective for their intended purpose, which doesn't need to be hypertrophy. And doing things like glute bridges into glute bridges into glute bridges, although, like I said, will burn a lot, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do a whole lot for the intended purpose. That being said, I do feel like these low impact workouts and workouts like these, where they are, to an extent, actually say calming and quite relaxing, I think could actually be either really good for a warm up, perhaps, depending on what your goals are, but also really good if you're recovering from injury. Because a lot of times when people have gone through injuries where they aren't able to go through mass amounts of knee flexion and extension, so obviously you don't want to do squat variations and whatnot, doing workouts like this where you are kind of lying down, there's a little load on the joints, and you're going through controlled ranges of motion, I do personally believe, depending on what the injury is and depending on what your goals are, these types of workouts could, like I said, be really beneficial for those who are recovering from injury. Or, that being said, those who are simply getting into working out for the first time, those who want to work out from home, those who want an extensive warm-up before whatever activity they're doing, actually those who just genuinely enjoy workouts like this. The thing is, on this channel, I always want to promote and preach that you've got to do what's best for you. Your goals are important. Whether I deem a workout to be effective or not, if it's working for you, then what I think about it doesn't really matter that much. This channel is not just about hypertrophy. Obviously, resistance training and hypertrophy is my kind of biggest passion, I should say, in the fitness realm. And I do believe hypertrophy training can benefit so many people. But if that doesn't appeal to you, that doesn't appeal to you. And I want to make you feel like this is an inclusive space for you and your goals that may not necessarily be the same as my goals, which is why I'm acknowledging that workouts like this could benefit a lot of people and could actually appeal to a lot of people depending on their goals. So movements like this, where you're kind of very much like lifting the leg inward, it's going to be quite adductor dominant. And the adductors are the muscle of the inner thighs. So the kind of muscle that sits here, just up here. So when you typically think about adduct, abduct, adduct, closer to the body, so inner thighs, for example, abduct, further away from the body. I remember, I think it was Ryan Dewey's said that his old college professor used to refer to abduction as being abducted by aliens. So obviously when you're being abducted, you go further away to help him remember what abduction meant. But I thought it was really good way of thinking about it. This would be abduction because you're going further away from the body. Think about aliens that take you away, you're going further away from the body, abduction. The thing you'll often find in these workouts, they often tend to be very much glute dominant. Maybe the bit of inner thighs being the adductors in there as well, but they do really tend to neglect the quads and the hamstrings. I say that because essentially movements like this, obviously we understand glutes in their shortened position because the big focus there and the point in which this is hardest is going to be the contraction, which is here. The glutes don't actually get into a lengthened position because they're never being stretched in this movement, therefore shortened position, dominant movement. Same applies here. Is it a bad movement? Absolutely not. I think it has a time and a place, has a purpose, and I think ultimately you could actually make this quite a good resistance movement if you had something like a Smith machine handy, but that's irrelevant to this video. The thing is, what I'm trying to say is the quads and the hamstrings essentially really need a couple of things. One of the primary functions of the hamstrings, for example, is going to be flexing the knee, so bending the knee. The only movement we've seen that involves any real kind of potential knee flexion, being the bending of the knees, is about to occur now. At what point does gravity take over? So it'll be about past the 90-degree point, just before then, gravity is pulling that down now, and she's essentially pulling the feet towards her body, which is also what gravity is doing. So the involvement of the hamstrings is actually going to be quite limited. And also when it comes to the quads, one of the primary functions there is going to be knee extension, so straightening the knees. So essentially the back end of this, so we're bending, now we're straightening. Again, at what point is there sufficient resistance to actually do something for that muscle? Again, not with the idea of hypertrophy, but with the consideration, is the muscle actually working enough to achieve a result of sorts? And the answer to that, especially when considering the quads and the hamstrings during workouts like this, is oftentimes unfortunately not. So throughout this workout you may really find your glutes and whatnot burning. That being said, when we were doing like the leg lifts earlier on, you may find your quads getting quite sore and spicy then. Again, that's probably going to be largely due to the hip flexor involvement, which obviously sit very close to the quads. So that also aligns very much with what I said earlier about sensation not necessarily correlated to effectiveness. And the same thing's going to apply here. You're going to be working the hip flexors quite a lot, and when you lift those legs up, it's going to make you feel like the quads are doing a lot more than they actually are, when the reality is it's actually just the hip flexors jumping in and kind of giving you the illusion sometimes that the quads are more involved than they might be. And then we finish off with some stretching, which in fairness, Pamela's absolutely embarrassed me here because I can't even touch my toes. And it's embarrassing to admit I look like a log when I try and stretch. My friend actually refers to me as an immobile log, so that's quite funny. Whether you're training with the intention of hypertrophy or not, when you're working out muscles to an extent, you are likely hoping to experience, whether you realize it or not, some development. You say, I want more toned legs, that usually entails some development. I want more defined legs, that may entail some development. You want stronger legs, again, it may entail some development. So one of the things in the description here, no sweat, only strength. And again, that does typically usually entail some development. Again, I'm not saying you're trying to be a bodybuilder. I'm not trying to say you're trying to build muscle as your sole purpose or your sole intention or sole goal. There's oftentimes some development involved in a lot of the goals you may have. And it's key to note there, it's still important to choose effective movements. And again, not to fall into the trap that burning means it's working, because I've said this many times before, just because you're hurting it doesn't mean you're working it effectively. And that very much goes into, like I said earlier, sensation not necessarily correlating to effectiveness. But that being said, I think workouts like this are a fantastic entry point. I think they're fantastic if you're recovering from injury. I think they're fantastic if you have goals that are a bit more diverse. You want a bit of stretching in there, you want a bit of everything, because Pamela does cover a lot of bases here. And I think these are also fantastic if you actually just genuinely enjoy them. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing these, you enjoy what you're doing, and you're experiencing results from what you're doing, then what I say about them is largely irrelevant. These workouts have a time and a place. Absolutely, I fully back it. But all I'm trying to say is don't fall into the trap of staying with these workouts and never progressing and never pushing yourself, regardless of what your goals are. But also don't fall into the trap of assuming that just because a muscle is burning and hurting, it's doing a lot. And also don't fall into the trap of being made to believe that certain movements work muscles that they may not. For example, insufficient flexion and extension of the knee here indicates insufficient quad and hamstring involvement, despite what the description says. But flip around, these are also things that are very much pointed out and highlighted throughout the TFNL growth guide anyway, where it kind of teaches you how to pick up on those things and how certain muscles should be working and why they might not be working when influencers tell you they should be. But again, those are just my thoughts and opinions. But we're very quickly going to crack on with comment question of the week. It's an interesting one. I currently don't do any ab exercises in my gym routine. Is this something I should change? The simple answer is it something you want to change? At the end of the day, you must train for your goals. If your goals goals are to develop your abs, then sure, train your abs. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty certain that the abs are one of the muscle groups that have a maintenance volume of 0, meaning you could not work them out at all and you will maintain the development of the abs because they're getting so heavily worked through other movements as well, which is why sometimes people train abs for a bit, then they stop and they go back and all sorts. If you want to work out the abs because you want to achieve an ab related goal, by all means, but don't feel like you have to. But that is it. That is the video. If you like the video, please let me know you like the video by liking the video and maybe even by clicking the red button down below to subscribe to the channel and potentially even tickling that bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. And if you two have a question you want me to answer at the end of the next video, then please do drop it down below in the comment section for comment question of the week and I shall do so. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my shameless growth guide plug and thank you for tolerating the video.